Hello, my dear mastermind. They were tracking your patterns, every move you made, every decision you took, every path you considered. They built predictive models, ran probability assessments, mapped your most likely trajectories. They thought they had you figured out, thought they knew exactly where you were headed, thought they could see your next 10 moves before you even made them. They were confident, comfortable, certain, and that certainty was their first mistake. Because while they were busy predicting your future based on your past, you were quietly studying a completely different game. They expected you to move forward. You moved sideways. They expected you to climb the ladder they built. You found a different building. They expected you to play by the rules they established. You rewrote the entire framework. And the moment you made that move, the moment you went in a direction their models didn't account for, everything they thought they knew became obsolete. Let me tell you what they had on you, what their analysis predicted, what their assessments concluded. They studied your background, your education, your circumstances, your resources. Based on all that data, they calculated your probable path. If you came from here, you'd likely go there. If you had this degree, you'd probably pursue that career. If you face these obstacles, you'd typically choose these solutions. Their predictions weren't random. They were based on decades of data, thousands of comparable examples, proven patterns. And for most people, those predictions would have been accurate, because most people follow predictable trajectories. Most people take the expected next step. Most people choose the logical progression. But here's what their models didn't account for. You weren't interested in being most people. You weren't motivated by what was expected. You weren't concerned with following predicted paths. You were operating from a completely different set of priorities, ones they had no framework to measure. They predicted you'd take the safe route. You chose the uncertain one. They predicted you'd follow conventional wisdom. You trusted your own knowing. They predicted you'd wait for permission. You granted yourself authority. They predicted you'd stay in your lane. You changed lanes entirely. Every single prediction they made was based on the assumption that you valued security over possibility, acceptance over authenticity, predictability over purpose, but you didn't. And that's what broke their entire system. Here's what they didn't see coming. While they were analyzing your past to predict your future, you were actively becoming someone your past couldn't predict. You weren't just changing directions. You were changing the decision-making framework itself. The person who would have taken their predicted path, that version no longer aligned with who you were becoming by the time they finished their analysis. Think about what happened in that quiet period before you made your move. They thought you were stuck, indecisive, uncertain about which of their predicted paths to take. What you were actually doing was studying options they didn't even know existed, learning skills they didn't think were relevant, building capabilities they weren't tracking, developing a vision they had no category for. You were preparing for a direction that wasn't on their map, and you did it silently, deliberately, without announcing your intentions, without seeking validation, without asking if it was the right move, because you knew. The moment you revealed your plans to people who only understood conventional paths, they would try to redirect you, question you, warn you about risks, project their limitations onto your possibilities. So you kept it internal, kept moving, kept building towards something they couldn't see yet. Then came the moment. The decision point where their predictions said you'd go left. And you went somewhere they didn't even have on their compass. Not right, not straight. Somewhere completely different. A direction they didn't predict because they didn't believe it was possible for someone with your background, your resources, your circumstances. Their entire framework was built on limitations, and you rejected the framework entirely. The disruption was immediate, not just surprise, genuine disruption. Because in their worldview, people like you don't make moves like that, don't take paths like that, don't succeed in directions like that. Their models had no precedent for it. Their data had no comparison. Their experience had no reference point. And here's the beautiful part. While they were recovering from the disruption of your first unexpected move, you were already 3 moves ahead in a game they didn't know you were playing. They tried to make sense of it, tried to find the logic in your choice, tried to fit your decision into their existing frameworks. Was it desperation? Was it rebellion? Was it luck? They needed an explanation that maintained their worldview, that kept their predictive systems intact, that allowed them to believe they still understood how success works. What they couldn't accept was the simplest truth. You just chose differently, operated from different values, played a different game entirely. And the more they tried to analyze your move, the less sense it made through their lens. Because their lens was built on conventional wisdom, traditional paths, established rules. Your move was built on personal truth, authentic desire, internal alignment. You weren't trying to beat their game, you were playing your own. And games they don't understand, they can't control, can't predict, can't influence. Now they're watching more carefully, trying to identify your new pattern, attempting to predict your next move based on this unexpected direction. But here's what they still don't understand. You're not following a pattern they can track. You're not building a trajectory they can project. Every move you make is informed by something they can't measure: internal compass, personal truth, authentic alignment, and those things don't follow predictable patterns. Let me show you the difference between their framework and yours. Their framework asks, what's the safe move? What's the expected move? What's the proven move? Your framework asks, what's the true move? What's the aligned move? What's the move that honors who I'm becoming? Completely different questions, completely different answers, completely different outcomes. They're optimizing for security. You're optimizing for authenticity. They're following maps drawn by others. You're creating your own territory. They're climbing ladders that already exist. You're building different structures entirely. And that difference, that fundamental difference in approach, is why they'll never successfully predict you. Because prediction requires pattern, and you're not interested in being a pattern. You're interested in being yourself, fully, unapologetically, unpredictably. Think about the moment you made that unexpected move. They had you going toward the corner office. You went toward creative freedom. They had you climbing corporate hierarchy. You built something independent. They had you following the prestigious path. You chose the purposeful one. They had you settling into stability by 35. You chose transformation instead. Not because you were rebelling, because you were aligning. And alignment doesn't follow their timelines. What's fascinating is how they react when their predictions fail. First, confusion. How did we miss this? Then, adjustment. Trying to recalculate based on new data. Then, more predictions. Now they'll definitely go here next. But they're making the same fundamental error again. They're assuming you'll eventually conform to a predictable pattern. They're assuming this unexpected move was an anomaly. They're assuming you'll settle into a trajectory they can track. They're wrong. Because the unexpected move wasn't the exception. It was the new standard. You're not going to settle into predictability. You're committed to continuous alignment, which means every time they think they've figured out your new pattern, you'll already be evaluating your next true move. And here's what deeply unsettles them. Unpredictability, rooted in authenticity, is unbeatable. Because you're not trying to confuse them. You're just being real. And real doesn't follow scripts. There's power in being unpredictable this way. Not chaotic unpredictability. Strategic unpredictability. Not random decisions. Aligned decisions that happen to be unexpected. This kind of unpredictability places you beyond conventional handling, not in a difficult way, in a sovereign way. You can't be controlled through predicted consequences, can't be influenced through anticipated outcomes, can't be redirected through projected futures, because you're not making decisions based on their predictions anyway. You're making decisions based on your truth, and truth doesn't care about probability, doesn't care about precedent, doesn't care about what usually happens to people in your situation. Truth just is. And when you follow it, you end up in places their models never accounted for, creating outcomes their data never suggested, achieving things their framework said weren't possible. Let me tell you what they're dealing with now. A presence they can't outthink because you're not thinking like them. A player they can't outmaneuver because you're not playing their game. A person they can't predict because you're not following their logic. This isn't about being smarter, it's about being truer. And here's the shift that changes everything. The moment you stopped trying to meet their expectations, you became impossible to manage through their expectation systems. They built their careers on being able to predict people, being able to guide outcomes, being able to influence directions. Their expertise, their authority, their value, all of it depends on their ability to see what's coming and position accordingly. But you made a move they didn't see coming, and that move didn't just surprise them. It challenged their assumptions, questioned the foundations they relied on, and exposed the limits of their predictive confidence. Because if they couldn't predict you, if they couldn't guide you, if they couldn't influence your direction, then what exactly is their expertise worth? What exactly is their authority based on? This is why they're so invested in making sense of your move, in finding the pattern, in predicting what comes next. It's not just about you anymore. It's about their entire framework staying relevant. But their framework isn't relevant. Not for you. Maybe it works for people who want to follow prescribed paths, achieve conventional success, meet traditional milestones. But you're not interested in any of that. You're interested in authentic living, purpose-driven work, aligned choices. And once you choose alignment over approval, their entire system of predictions becomes background noise. Interesting, but irrelevant. Here's what they're learning about you now. Your moves aren't random. They're just operating from logic they don't have access to. Your choices aren't impulsive. They're just based on values they don't share. Your path isn't chaotic. It's just not on their map. There's perfect internal logic to everything you do. Perfect alignment with who you're becoming. perfect coherence with what you value. They just can't see it because they're looking through the wrong lens. And you're not going to explain it to them. Not because you're being mysterious, because explanation requires shared framework, shared values, shared understanding of what matters. And you don't share those things with people who are trying to fit you into their prediction models. You share those things with people who understand that some paths can't be predicted, only walked. Some moves can't be analyzed, only made. The freedom in this is profound. When you're no longer concerned with being predictable, you're no longer constrained by their expectations. When you're no longer trying to meet their projections, you're no longer limited by their imagination. When you're no longer following their maps, you're no longer restricted by their territories. And what they're about to discover is that every time they think they've updated their understanding of you, you've already evolved past it. Because you're not static. You're not a fixed target they can eventually figure out. You're continuously evolving, continuously aligning more deeply with truth, continuously becoming more of who you actually are and who you actually are. That's not something they can predict, because it's not something you're performing, it's something you're discovering. And discovery doesn't follow predicted paths. Think about where you are now versus where they predicted you'd be. Different city, different career, different lifestyle, different priorities, different definition of success, all of the above. And more importantly, think about how it feels. Living in a direction you chose, not one they predicted. Following a path you created, not one they prescribed. Building a life that's authentically yours, not one that fits their models. They thought they had you figured out, thought they knew your next 10 years, thought they could see your ceiling, your limitations, your probable outcomes. They had you staying in the industry you started in. You switched to something they didn't see coming. They had you settling in the city where you had connections. You moved somewhere that called to you. They had you following the traditional relationship timeline. You created your own definition of partnership. They had you pursuing the promotions and raises. You pursued purpose and freedom instead. Every single prediction, wrong. Not because you were trying to prove them wrong, because you were trying to be true. And truth led you somewhere their models never accounted for, somewhere their data never suggested, somewhere their experience said wasn't possible. But you're there, living it, proving that their predictions only work for people who accept their limitations. Now they're dealing with a new problem. Every time someone else is considering an unexpected move, considering an unpredicted path, considering a direction that doesn't fit the models, you're living proof it's possible. You're evidence that their predictions aren't absolute. You're demonstration that their frameworks aren't the only way. And that's disruptive to their certainty, because once people see that the game is optional, that the rules are negotiable, that the paths are unlimited, their predictive confidence breaks down entirely. You didn't just make an unexpected move. You made a statement, not through words, through action. A statement that says, your predictions don't define my possibilities. Your models don't determine my path. Your frameworks don't limit my future. I choose based on truth, not probability. Based on alignment, not precedent. Based on authenticity, not acceptance. And that choice, that fundamental choice to operate from a different framework entirely, that's what makes you unpredictable in the most powerful way possible. They're trying to update their models now, trying to incorporate your unexpected move into their analysis, trying to predict what someone who makes moves like yours will do next. But they're still using the same flawed approach. They're still trying to predict you based on pattern, based on logic, based on data. What they don't understand is that you're not following pattern. You're following truth. And truth doesn't repeat, it reveals. Every move you make going forward will come from the same place the last one did. Internal alignment, personal truth, authentic knowing, which means every move will be exactly right for you and completely unexpected to them, because right for you and predictable to them are almost never the same thing. Right for you requires honoring your unique path. Predictable to them requires following common patterns. So what comes next? They're wondering. They're watching. They're waiting to see if you'll maintain this unexpected direction or eventually return to predictable patterns. And here's what you know that they don't. This isn't a direction you're trying to maintain. This is a way of being you've embodied. You're not following a new path. You're pathfinding. And pathfinders don't return to roads. They create them. The version of you that would have followed their predicted path. That version is no longer part of who you are. Not struggling, not hiding, not waiting to resurface. Replaced by someone who makes decisions differently, who evaluates options differently, who defines success differently, who measures fulfillment differently. This isn't a detour. This is your actual life, and their predictions about your old life have no relevance to your real one. So let them analyze. Let them predict. Let them try to figure out your next move. While they're building models, you'll be building your life. While they're tracking patterns, you'll be following truth. While they're predicting your future, you'll be creating it in real time, based on who you're becoming, not who you were, based on what aligns, not what's expected, based on what's true, not what's probable. They thought they had your next move figured out. They were wrong. They thought they could predict your path. They were wrong. They thought they understood your trajectory. They were wrong, and they'll keep being wrong. Not because you're trying to confuse them, but because you're committed to something they can't measure. Authenticity, alignment, truth. And those things don't follow predictable patterns. They create unprecedented paths. Welcome to being unpredictable in the most powerful way possible. Welcome to being authentic in a world of predictions. Welcome to being free.